Hi, Tony Woodall with My Way on the Way, my journey on walking the Camino de Santiago. I wanted to share this particular video because this is the video, or I should say, this is the presentation that I saw that really did inspire me to walk the Camino de Santiago. I had never heard of the Camino de Santiago ever before in my entire life, and I've been around for a while. I wish I had heard about it sooner, but I didn't. So anyway, I saw a presentation for a club, and I posted that on my Facebook and LinkedIn to advertise this particular presentation that was going to be done at the club. And then on my Facebook post, one of my people that follow me on my Facebook channel, they were a former colleague of mine, and they said, "Hey, have you ever seen the movie The Way with Martin Sheen?" He said, "You need to watch this movie if you're interested in the Camino de Santiago." So I followed her advice, and she also had mentioned that this was one of the items on her bucket list that she wanted to do. So I said, well, I'll have to watch that. So the week before our presentation with Jeff Davidson at the Golden Gate Breakfast Club, I watched The Way. It moved me. It brought me to tears. I just love the relationship aspect of the movie, but I really love the setting. And it isn't a movie about the Camino de Santiago. It's really a relationship movie. It's just in it's on the Camino is the set for this as they walk along the Camino de Santiago, and I was just amazed at what that looked like in the different areas in Spain. And so anyway, I watched Jeff's presentation, and it was phenomenal. I learned so much, and as he was talking about his journey, I decided at that time that I wanted to make that same journey. So I just wanted to share this with you. If you've never heard of the Camino de Santiago, if you don't know anything about the walk or the way, I encourage you to watch the rest of this video. It'll give you some inspiration, I believe, for maybe walking it one day and making it part of your bucket list and hopefully completing it. I am walking the Camino de Santiago this year. I have my plane tickets, heading to France. I'm going to Paris, down to Saint Jean Pied de Port, and then going to walk all the way across the northern part of Spain on the Camino de Santiago Francis route. So pay attention to the video. Hope you enjoyed. If you do enjoy the video of Jeff, please, like it, subscribe, leave a comment. Jim, I'll share it with Jeff, and he'll be glad to respond. We are now friends and taking hikes. He's my Camino coach, as I call him, and he's getting me trained to walk the Camino. So thank you so much. Enjoy the video, and again, leave some comments. Let us know what you think.
Again, thank you to the Golden Gate Breakfast Club for the opportunity to speak with you this morning about my experiences walking the Camino de Santiago. I've actually been to Europe twice and walked the Camino Frances, which is the one I'll be talking about primarily, and also a segment of the Portuguese Camino. This is going to be a mile wide and an inch deep. This is not in depth in any one particular area, but it's my attempt to sort of just give you an overview and a flavor of what the Camino is all about. And as Tony mentioned, 40 plus years in the fire service. I retired in 2014 from the Mill Valley Fire Department, served my last couple years there as the fire chief. And my wife and I do have the nonprofit. The main focus of the work that I do through the nonprofit is in house building service work, primarily in Tijuana and Tecate. And in 2019, we completed work on house number 201, which is pretty exciting for us. I also volunteer with the Marin County Fire Department as a lookout up at Mount Tamalpais. So I like to look down on the community that I used to serve and the greater area to keep an eye out for smokes during the summer. I'm also a plan section chief with the North Bay Incident Management Team. We're a local all-hazard team. We've been deployed since the beginning of March in support of the Marin County response to COVID-19, and we're currently helping manage testing operations and alternate care sites in the event of hospital surge. And I'm also on the faculty of Santa Rosa Junior College. Been doing project work and instruction there for about 20 years. And this year I actually did my first class on Zoom, which was rather interesting. So one of the big questions I get from people when I tell them that I walked the Camino is they say, wow, well, how was it? And the it is a very hard thing to describe in a single phrase or sentence. It's not as easy as summing up the work of an engineer or a scientist as a puzzle, which is a great way to condense it down. But what I'm going to try to do is tell you a little bit about the it before I try to describe what the it was. I'll also mention that all of the photos that you see here today, I took with an iPhone, nothing special, nothing fancy. So short of the maps and a couple of graphics that are here, all of the photos I took with my phone, with the exception of this photo, which you see here, which was the National Geographic photo of the day on April 16th of 2015. And approximately 6 weeks later, I was standing in the exact same spot. So I may not be National Geographic level, but at least I get a sense of where good photos can be taken. So a little bit about the Camino de Santiago and specifically the Camino Frances. It is an 800-kilometer walk. The origin of this walk is that it is believed that the remains of one of Jesus' apostles, James, are entombed in the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela in northwest Spain. So this has been a religious pilgrimage for over 1,200 years. And it's estimated that some 20 million people have walked throughout the years. And just in 2019 alone, 300,000 people registered for completion of their pilgrimage to Santiago. Like many people, I became familiar with the Camino through watching the movie The Way. And I wouldn't say it's a movie about the Camino. It's a relationship movie set to the backdrop of the Camino, but it introduced a lot of people, myself included, to the Caminos throughout Europe and specifically this Camino Frances. And most pilgrims start in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port and end in Santiago de Compostela. So here's a map of Europe. In the corner here, I'm kind of showing you with my pointer, is Santiago de Compostela. And you can see all of these routes throughout Europe find their way to Santiago. So if you look up in the upper left corner, you see the symbol of a seashell or a scallop shell. This is the symbol of the pilgrimage. And the point here is Santiago, and all of the tines of the shell equal the routes that you can walk. And again, this is the walk that I did in 2015, the 800-kilometer walk. And then in 2017, I went back and I walked a fairly good chunk of the Portuguese Camino. Now, to give perspective of what this might look like, if I was to walk out my front door here in Novato and turn south, I would walk to Disneyland and still have about 30 miles left over to try to walk around and find a place to park and a place to eat and somewhere to stay. But it's the equivalent of walking a big chunk of the length of California. Here's a map that shows on the left-hand side, beginning in Saint Jean, the route all the way across to the right and terminating in Santiago. And you can see there's a steep hike through the Pyrenees. There's a big section here called the Meseta, which is about 10 days of flat, somewhat desolate, but still very beautiful walking. And on the top here are larger cities. And when I say large cities, it's relative. It could be 30,000, 50,000, 150,000. But these are the larger cities along the route. But at the bottom are names of small fork in the road, small communities that make up a lot of the flavor of the Camino. And as an example, if you were to say, I'm going to drive through or fly over San Francisco, you'd get a much different take on that than if you were going to say, I'm going to walk across San Francisco and I'm going to go through the Richmond, the Excelsior, Vernal Heights, Presidio, Bayview. So all of these neighborhoods and communities down here make up a huge part of the flavor of the Camino. One of the other questions I get is how long did it take or how long does it take? And that really depends. In my case, I had budgeted about 25 days. So I needed to walk about 20 miles a day, but I also gave myself permission if I got tired if I was injured, if I wasn't feeling it, that I'd give myself permission to bus ahead, walk, fly, whatever I needed to do. But in the end, I spent 26 days on the Camino with one rest day. So it was 25 days of walking. Another way to measure progress on the Camino, I left San Francisco with a clean shave and a shortcut. And on my way home, 33 days later, here I am with the full beard and somewhat longer, shaggier hair, starting to look like this now with the shelter in place. This next photo, I hope most of you have finished your breakfast, because another way to measure progress on the Camino is the amount of Band-Aids and tape and lost toenails and blisters that you have. And I'm going to move very quickly off that one for those of you that may still be eating. Another way of tracking your progress is by the passport stamps that you get in your passport. And you receive this document at the beginning of your walk in St. Jean. And everywhere you stay or stop along the way, you get a stamp unique to that church, hostel, restaurant, museum, cathedral, monastery, whatever it may be. So you could walk this Camino multiple times and have a passport that looks completely unique and different every time. So why I wanted to do this is another question I get. Well, I saw the movie, it piqued my interest. I put it on the bucket list. I love traveling, but had never been to Europe. Love hiking. And my wife was in a master's program in 2015 and said, hey, they're doing a study abroad for 3 weeks in Italy and I'm planning on going. Would you be interested? And initially I wasn't, because I didn't want to get in her way while she was there to focus on school. But it turned out to be a perfect opportunity for us to go to Europe together, spend a couple days before I started walking, and she could go off to school. While I'm not a religious person, I am very interested in people, history, food, culture, architecture. So what a great way to find out about Spain and immerse myself deeply by walking across the country. And certainly the walk is doable just based on the number of people that have done it. But I had to ask myself, is this something I could do? So I began my preparation. I went to a seminar at REI. I realized that there were a couple of decent guidebooks that I could start reading. So I grabbed a couple books, started plotting some basic strategy. And when I arrived in Santiago, in Saint Jean, I received a nice folded two-sided paper with a 34-day or 34-stage map. And I ended up using this to track my progress. So my first day here in the upper left, number one, I did walk their recommended route. The next day, I walked almost a complete number two and number three. But I realized that if I would have walked exactly as this was laid out, I would have been walking at some level someone else's Camino, and I really wanted to make it my own. But having said all that about maps and prep, you could get your airline ticket, your passport, your bag, and you can just go. And as long as you start where there's yellow and blue seashell arrows and markers, you can make your way across Spain. It's very well marked. It's difficult, if not impossible, to get lost, although it's not unheard of that people stray off the trail here and there. But the route is incredibly well marked. And you also look for a fellow walker with a backpack and a scallop shell on their back, sharing the pilgrim greeting of Buen Camino, good way, good walk, and you know you're on the right track. Because I was distance hiking, I had to get as much as I could into a backpack, and so it was a very small amount of equipment, and even some of the items here, like a solar powered charger, was not necessary. I thought I would do journaling in a book, which I didn't. So some of those kind of items ended up being necessary, but I still had to carry them. And it's not uncommon for pilgrims along the way to donate equipment and leave it at places that they stay because they find that they're carrying more than they need. So another question is, what's a typical day? Well, for me, I like to get up early. I like to walk early because sometimes in the middle of the heat, it can be a little tiring. So up early, sometimes restaurants and bars weren't open in the morning to get coffee or food. So usually around 10 a.m., I'd stop for a light breakfast, either a tortilla or a bocadillo or some toast and bread or some yogurt and cheese. During the day, I'm talking with people that I'm meeting, or I'm walking and not talking. I'm reading the guidebook to see if there's alternate routes, what I might see along the way. When I get my accommodations in the evening, I'm going to give myself a few minutes to sort of decompress and relax a little bit and sort of take stock on how the day was. Because it's 2 socks, 2 shirts, 2 pants, every day you're washing what you wore, so it's ready to rotate through. So every day is a laundry bin day, and then hanging it out before dinner. And then at the end of the day, I was doing the journaling, and I originally planned on writing, but I decided instead the first day to make a couple of Facebook posts. And as it turned out to be helpful for me to share the experience, and people would say, "Oh, tell me about that place you're staying at," so I could elaborate on the accommodations or about the food or the people I met. And I ended up with about a fourth of the people that followed me on Facebook actually responding to with comments. So it turned out to be really great engagement for me while I was on the walk. Accommodations. You stay in what are called albergues, which is a pilgrim hostel. You need to present your passport to show that you're actually a pilgrim walking the Camino. Then you get access to dormitory style accommodations. Sometimes you pay a little extra and you might get a private room or a 2 or 3 bunk room instead of a large room with 30, 40, 50, 100 bunk beds. But being in the fire service for so many years, sleeping in a dorm style environment was not a huge deal for me, although I definitely recommend earplugs. And when you arrive at the albergue that you're going to stay at, you'll notice a sign out front usually saying that beds are €7 and what the meal of the evening might look like. And here's another picture on the right saying that the pilgrim's menu for the night is $11. And some of the services that might be available to you at different albergues. This one has a cocina or a kitchen. So if you want to bring your own food in and cook, you can. It's got a bakery, vending machines. So you can spend 25 to 35 euros a day and live very comfortably on the Camino. Here's a typical pilgrim dinner. Starts off with a salad, which sometimes is enough of it in and of itself. It's got a nice hearty portion of tuna or some kind of fish, which is your protein, and the vegetables. And then a typical main course always has French fries, but there's usually a fish, a chicken, a pork, a beef. And then for dessert, you get either some fresh fruit or a flan. I always brought the fresh fruit with me the next day on the trail, so I had something to nibble on if I got a little hungry in the middle of the day before I took an official lunch break. And of course, throughout Spain, different regions that you're in are going to have different food delicacies. Paella is big in Spain, of course, and tapas and pinchos. So taking advantage of the different regional foods and wines is a huge part of the Camino as well. In the early 1400s, there was a hospital that was built that then in the 1500s became a monastery, and then in the 1800s became a winery, and it's still an operating winery today. And in the late 1800s, they put a cask in alongside the trail so that pilgrims could fill up either a tap with some wine or a tap with some water along the way. So a little purely for antioxidants and medical research, of course, you get a little bit of wine to take with you on the trail. And these gifts that are provided along the way are a big part of the Camino. And it's not uncommon as you're walking to see out in front of a business or a house out in the middle of a small community, a jug of water, a bag of food, cookies, crackers, fresh fruit, and the sign saying free, do not leave money. And it's one of the commitments that's made historically to the pilgrims to take care of them along the way. This is my last day before arriving in Santiago, and I was very excited, and I woke up and I actually had a hard time sleeping that night. And in addition to just the anticipation of the final day, there was something capturing my attention, and I couldn't quite catch what it was until I walked outside, caught this wonderful photo, and then saw as I walked up to this building here that it was the local bakery. And what was piquing my attention was the smell of the fresh bread. So I was standing there watching for a couple minutes, and one of the workers came by, and I held out €1 and said, you know, "Cuánto, how much?" And she gave me a small chunk of bread, which I was able to carry that smell and that taste and that sense of community with me for the rest of my last day on the trail. There's wonderful sculptures and art and encouragement along the way. Some of it's 1,000 years old, some of it's weeks old, and it's wonderfully inspiring. And some of it is listed in the guidebooks as things to see, and it tells you the reasons why. But you'll walk on stones that are laid by the Roman Empire. You'll walk across the bridge that folklore says that there was 1,000 duels between knights vying for the favor of the king to receive his daughter's hand in marriage. And every year in this community, they have a jousting festival to commemorate that. There's a bridge in the town of Llerena, and it was erected under orders from the Queen in the 13th century because she found out that locals were charging pilgrims a tariff to boat them across the river as part of their pilgrimage. And she said it's imperative that we support the pilgrimage. So she ordered the construction of this bridge with the orders that no pilgrim would ever be charged to cross the bridge on pilgrimage. And this is called the Puente Llerena, or the Bridge of the Queen. For days and days, you can be out in the middle of nowhere, walking through wheat fields, wine fields. You can be walking through forested areas, and then you can find yourself coming into towns, both small and large. And I found it unique that I would anticipate the cities that I was coming into, but as soon as I did, I felt like I was being compressed, and compression creates heat and friction. And what I mean by that is the noise got louder, the cars went faster, there was more people, crowded, sign pollution, noise pollution. And so every time I anticipated getting into a city, I found myself quickly wanting to get back out on the open road. And I recently had an interesting experience that brought my Camino back to me after 3 weeks of self-isolating after being exposed to a COVID-19 person, and luckily not being mildly symptomatic, but not enough to get tested. I went shopping, and after being at home for 3 weeks and having a quiet, methodical kind of lifestyle, I found myself in line with lines taped off and masks and being queued up and wash your hands and do this and do that. And it gave me that feeling like I was back in a big city on the Camino, and I just wanted to get back away from that and get some inner peace and solitude back. Because the Camino is a religious pilgrimage, there are a lot of emphases on the churches and cathedrals. You'll see everything from the pre-1200 Romanesque style architecture to the later 1300 and beyond Gothic style. Always incredible and wonderful places to visit. You'll see churches small that are the size of a single car garage, all the way up to 3 stories of ornate gold with lots of different figurines and symbols. It was a great place to sit in the cathedrals in the afternoons when it was 75, 95, 100 degrees out. And the cathedrals were quiet, dark, place to relax, catch your breath, sit for a few minutes. So I always enjoyed the solitude and the recovery that the cathedrals allowed me. And they're not just sanctuaries for people for various reasons. There's almost every church steeple in northern Spain has storks nesting up there. So that's always fun to see. But here's another example of some of the architecture the art that you see along the way. And it's everything from a variation to the arrow pointing you in the right direction to the more typical symbol of a pilgrim with the gourd and the staff and the backpack. And I love this simple cutout of a flat piece of metal showing the pilgrim with the heart of the shell, or the pilgrim's heart. And then out in the middle of nowhere, when you don't see a lot of arrows for a few hours, or a lot of art, or even people, occasionally you'll run into just some spontaneous sort of pop-up art, which is inspiring and keeps you going. When you arrive in Santiago at the cathedral, they have daily masses. And then on some occasions, it's not consistent, but they will swing the bota fumerica, or the incense burner. And if you are there and have an opportunity to see this, it's quite an experience. You meet different types of people along the way. You meet the people that live there, living their daily life, living and supporting the Camino walkers through commerce, and then the people that are there walking. You get to see the daily life of people. On the left-hand side here in the center of town, in the mornings, the bread truck arrives and people get their delivery of bread. Then the dried meat guy shows up. Then the fish deliveries show up. Then the produce. And people come to the center to receive their groceries rather than going to the mega grocery store. On the right here is a group of people that are doing logistics for a college group of kids that are walking the Camino. So they're one town ahead of where the kids are walking, preparing their meals and getting their food ready and their accommodations for the night. I walked by a small farmer's market one day and I saw this gentleman who was very proud to show off his cured meats. And I said, "Señor, con permiso, un foto? Sir, may I please take a picture?" And an hour later, he was touring me through the entire facility, telling me everything about his wares, plus everybody else that was there. Spoke Spanish the whole time. I didn't understand a word he said, but we had a great time together. This gentleman on the right was walking a Camino and actually got injured and was unable to finish. But because of the generosity showed to him by other pilgrims and by people in the community, he now comes back every couple years and sets up a donativo grocery store, a donation. Take what you need, leave what you can. I saw this mother and daughter about 7 times throughout my walk, and never once were they not holding hands. Some of the other people that I met that were impactful in my experience, up on the top here, I've got Jonah and Thomas, buddies for the last 30 years. They met in the military in the mid-'80s. Every few years they get together for big epic adventure, and they let me be a part of their adventure by walking with them, having dinner with them. The first 2 weeks, we all walked together. We walked separately. And we always seem to find our way to the same hostel, or at least the same town every night for the first 2 weeks. In the bottom left corner here, I met this young lady named Anna from Italy on my Portuguese Camino in 2017. And she's a university student, and we had just a great time getting to know each other. I'm doing family history search right now, and my family has origins in Italy. So I've been sending her documents, and she's been translating documents for me, which has been wonderful and helpful. And down here, you can see her holding 2 necklaces. These were necklaces that were given to my wife and I by a family that we built a house for in Mexico. And then Peter here with the green shirt is a pediatric oncologist from Germany who grew up and got his medical training during a time when Germany was divided. He was living on the communist side. So now getting great opportunities to understand what life is like for him in now a unified Germany. And of course, you can't be 5,000 miles away from home and not run into 2 women that taught your nieces in after-school programs back here in Marin County. My wife was a big part of the walk, even though she was not physically on it. She certainly spiritually and emotionally was there with me. She walked out of town with me here on the left in St. John on day 1, and then met me at the top of the hill about 3 kilometers outside of Santiago and walked in with me, and we talked every day, and she provided great support for me. There's a spot on the walk called the Cruz de Ferro, or the Cross of Iron. It's the highest point on the Camino. And the rocks that you see here are rocks that have been left throughout the years by pilgrims. And the idea is they leave them to release a burden. They've carried this rock from home with them, and they let it go as a way of giving up a burden or releasing a stress. My mom helped me select a lot of stuff that I brought with me to carry, to share, to give away, or just to have. And she had this roll of film for years and kept saying, I got to get this developed. I got to get this developed. Well, I knew that the roll was never even used because the tag was still sticking out. So rather than leaving a rock as a burden, I decided to leave a roll of film unused as memories for all the people that had gone before me that I didn't get to share experiences with. Aunts and uncles, an older brother who had passed away. And 6 weeks after I got home, my mom passed away. So on my second Camino, I brought her ashes with me and sprinkled them in Portugal and in Italy, and also on the coast of Spain. So as we wrap it up here, trying to get back to the idea of how was it, I wish I had a single nugget, and I wish I could say in a simple statement what it all means, but I'm the kind of person that it's got to sort of saturate, incubate, and illuminate. And sometimes I come up with an epiphany in the moment, and a lot of times it takes a little bit longer. But ultimately, walking across Spain 500 miles in 25 days is very similar to building a house in 4 days or fighting a large fire. When you're with a group of people all of a like mind and focus, and you can shed the daily nuances and stresses and static of life. I got to check the mail. I got to do the laundry. I got to unload the dishwasher. I got to sweep the yard. When you can move away from some of those task-oriented things and focus on the big picture, spiritual, emotional, physical, you can accomplish a lot. And I constantly am reminded of that every day, whether I'm working to support COVID-19, I'm working with our youth groups in Mexico, or sharing my experience here with you today, because it doesn't make the Camino, how was it? It keeps it as it is. It's present in me every minute of the day. And with that, I will say thank you so much for the opportunity.
Hi, I hope you enjoyed that presentation by Jeff Davidson. If you did, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. I'll be posting more videos. I really appreciate you being here. Follow me on my journey. This is just my first Camino. I will be posting videos along the way. So join me on my way, on the way, going forward. Have a great day. Buen Camino.